Herzlich willkommen, liebe Zuschauer. Mein Name ist Uta Ogilvie und ich freue mich, einen Gast aus den USA heute bei mir zu haben, Professor William Toel. Professor Toel, welcome to Germany. Before we go any further, I'd like to give you the opportunity to let our viewers know a little bit about your personal and professional background.
Well, I have been teaching in the United States and lecturing in Germany for 34 years. And before that, I was president of a bank. And before that, I was a young company commander during Vietnam. So I'm actually getting quite old. And so yesterday was my 75th birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yes. I have a 52-year-old daughter and a 49-year-old son and a wonderful wife that I've been married to for be 32 years here in November. So who gives me the gift of life by sending me out places like this. So that's probably everything of any interest, unless you have specific questions.
You obviously have a strong connection to Germany. Where does this come from?
That's a wonderful question. I hope I can answer it. My mother was English and could not stand Germans of any kind. And so I grew up in a household in which there was no help for the passion, the Leidenschaft that I was born with. So it was rather awkward for me. But the first time I heard the German language on a shortwave radio, I thought it was the most beautiful music, the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. And yet it was nothing but a Deutsche Welle weather forecast on shortwave radio. So this is something that I didn't ask for, I didn't plan for, but it's something that's been with me, I think, even before my birth, because it's very powerful. It never goes away. And so this is my 30th trip, and sometimes for as long as 6 months. Sometimes I teach my classes from here. So I've lectured at Mannheim and Nuremberg, Erlangen, and the Bundeswehr-Universität at Hamburg and Munich, and at Freie University 2 years ago. So this is my passion. I have no European passion. I wear an American flag because I'm an American patriot. But at the same time, my true love is for German families.
What do you think about the current political situation in Germany and its effects and consequences for the future?
I believe that we're heading into what I call a perfect storm. You know, Germany has been relatively stable for over 70 years, but history moves like the waves of a sea, and 70 years is just about long enough. So I believe that in a short period of time, there will be what I call a perfect storm in Germany, and part of that is because of too severe a control coming out of Berlin. So when I say a perfect storm, I'm not speaking of something that is bad for German families. I'm speaking of something that is freeing for German families. It's something that's good, but I don't think that anyone in Germany really desires dramatic change. But, you know, Abraham Lincoln said that it is circumstances that make a president or bring down a president. And so I think the Umstände, the circumstances, are about to change dramatically, and that by spring of next year we'll see the political situation change very dramatically.
In which direction do you think?
I said it would a dramatic change. I think that the leadership that you have now and the nature of the political situation and leadership all the way from Adenauer on somewhat of a straight line all the way through Angela Merkel's reign, I think that the Chancellor, her cabinet, and those people who she has depended upon for a long time. You know, with Angela Merkel, it's like she takes the garden gnomes and she shifts them around from place to place in the yard, and she says, this is reform. But, of course, it's not reform at all. And so I think that the Chancellor and all of the people she's depended upon by spring will be gone from Germany, and an entire new group of leaders who have a deep caring for German families and what is happening actually to German families. Today they have no input into their future at all. Even decisions on COVID are made with no consultation with the national parliament or with the parliament in the Länder, and so people have no input into their future. And so I think that by spring we'll see an entirely new political system and a whole new group of faces, which will also come with fresh air.
Can you briefly explain to our viewers what you mean by the German model?
One summer, I think it was the summer that Germany won the World Cup. So one summer I hired a group of young German PhDs and others, and we did some very intensive research. And so the German model actually it has three elements to it. The German model itself is the efficiency model that is unique to Germany, and Helmut Schmidt was the first one who talked about it as the German model, but he was heavily criticized throughout Europe for claiming that Germany was unique or had a model that was efficient. But the German model is amazingly efficient. But what people in Germany don't know is that the model has a worldwide infrastructure that has been built over the last 50 years. And we can say, yes, but that's for Siemens, and that's for Lufthansa, and that's for Daimler-Benz. But that's not true. The German government has carefully built a worldwide infrastructure that's probably in at least 180 countries. It's very deep, it's very broad, and today it's used for commercial purposes, but in a heartbeat, it could be turned to be used for any purposes. That's how well organized it is. So, you know, Stalin and Morgenthau, one of the leaders in World War II in America, both made the same comment. They had never met each other. They didn't know they were making the same comment. But the comment was that whoever controls the immense, brutal power of German organization actually controls the world. Stalin believed that. He wanted all of Germany in 1945. But America and Britain also believed it, and they wanted the industrial might of Germany, which includes systems, that includes manufacturing, but it mostly includes Germans who have a desire to do things in an excellent manner, the Tüftling. So you have the model itself, which Angela Merkel manages and runs, and then you have this worldwide network, and then you have the more intrinsic thing, and that is Germans themselves. I have often said, and I'm serious about it, that if you went to the phone book and randomly took any 10 Germans, any 10, put them on a desert island with one palm tree, Within 6 months, they would organize themselves and begin manufacturing and selling something worldwide that would work. I've seen it, and I believe it. Obviously, Stalin and Morgenthau agreed with me. So in Germany today, there's this feeling of, even though Germans are tall, there's the feeling that they have to remain small. They sort of are bent over, and they want to look smaller than what they are. And the government is very happy to leave them looking small for the next 200 years. But the problem is, and I don't mean this with disrespect. Remember, I love Germans, and that's a word used in context. I don't use that for anything else other than my wife and children. But it is very sad right now when I see people all over Germany wearing masks on the streets and policemen writing tickets if your mask doesn't cover your entire face. Because what makes me sad is that Germans really should be wearing masks right now because they are robbing the world of Germanness. The smallness keeps them inside, and it keeps them down. And here's an entire world of people who need everything that Germany has, everything Morgenthau and Stalin described. And where is it? It's here, it's small, it's down. Germany is robbing the world of an immense gift.
You see one of the greatest dangers of our society in inflation. Why do you believe inflation is so dangerous?
The perfect storm is really three things, and inflation is the third one. But today, the German chancellor pretends that there is no inflation. And when they just did the Steuer meetings in Parliament, she didn't mention the word inflation. In fact, she only mentioned deflation. But that's fairly common. Inflation is a serious problem for German families. The perfect storm is under-the-table immigration. Never again is she going to allow 1 million people to come in without even bothering to do a simple background check. She can't do that anymore. But she can bring in immigration through a whole variety of guises. Where the UN mandates it, or the European Union says, there's a fire in a refugee camp. We must be kind to children. So immigration is still taking place, but it's under the table. Her natural controlling mechanism is always too tight for the situation. It's always a little bit too much, as if she doesn't trust Germans with their own future. And number 3 is that she's not going to tell Germans about inflation until it's already among them. She's going to wait until the time is a little bit too late. So inflation is the one thing that German families cannot handle. Immigration is negative for thousands of German families, as was seen here in Cologne, but that's only a tiny percentage. But inflation is dangerous to all German families. It robs their savings. The Bundesbank used to be the most admired central bank in the world because it was very careful in its thinking, very careful and detailed in its planning to keep the currency stable. And that gave Germans a feeling of comfort that they could work, they could plan, they could retire, they could raise children. But the Bundesbank and the Deutsche Mark are both gone, and now inflation, unless the chancellor brings it up and warns people, it can creep in without being seen. I wrote a recent blog in which I detailed about 9 ways that inflation is already in Germany. One of the simplest ways is that, we used to have a lot of things that were courtesies, human courtesies, in services and the way we dealt with each other. and these were cost-free. But they're not cost-free anymore. Since COVID now, we have a new normal, new circumstances. So not only do we have a reduction in quality in products without telling anyone, we have a reduction in volume and packaging in products without telling anyone. We now charge for services. I mean, it's almost ridiculous now. You want a copy, and they charge you 15 cents. That was always complimentary. So there are many examples. Anything that takes money out of Germans' pockets, and that's what inflation is, unless you have a reduction in prices or you have an increase in income. So I would say that there are a dozen different inflation factors that are already here, and that will rob every German family of the quality of life in their future.
At what level do you see inflation as a danger? Doesn't it also have something good in a controlled dose?
Tomorrow I get to have an interview with one of your chief economists here in Germany. So we'll be talking about expansionary monetary policy and central bank policies and interest rate swaps and all of these things, which are, to be honest, are somewhat irrelevant except between academics. But I would say that by April, Germany will be in the 4 to 4.5, 4.5% range in inflation. And that alone is somewhat devastating, not so much because of the financial impact, but because of the emotional impact. What I see on the streets of Germany today is Germans are desperate to find clarity, Klarheit. They're desperate for someone to tell them what is really going on. Was ist eigentümlich gewesen ist? I don't see that Germans have a clear view of where they are and where they're going. Of course, Germany's had no vision or no dream for 75 years. That's banned. That's a bad thing. You can't control dreams and visions. But inflation, let's say at even 4% in April, emotionally is devastating. It comes on top of COVID. It comes on top of an American election in which all of a sudden Germans feel nackig, they feel naked. We're not going to be able to take care of keeping Russian tanks out of the Fulda Gap over the next few months. We're going to be lucky to be able to take care of our own problems. We have very severe problems in America right now. It will only take a tiny spark to set them off. The last thing we'll be thinking about is protecting Germans. To be honest, we really don't think about it very much today. So you take this entire atmosphere, and now you introduce 4% inflation that the Angela Merkel has not prepared. There's no vorbereitet. There's no preparation for it. I think that may be the straw that broke the camel's back.
We are currently in the so-called second wave of the corona pandemic. In your opinion, what effects does corona have on the global economy, and how do you think will Germany develop in global comparison?
We're in the second wave of making sure that we have sufficient control. COVID-19 is not going to make the history books 50 years from now. We forgot about the Spanish flu in 50 years. It didn't make a history book after the 50 years. The Spanish flu killed 625,000 Americans, 12 to 15 million people worldwide, and was so dramatic that people were actually dropping dead walking to and from their homes and work. That's how sudden and dramatic it was. Corona is not a good thing. If I get it, I would probably be very sick, or maybe not survive at all at my age. But at the same time, it's much more of a controlling mechanism, a political mechanism, than it is a disease. I have not come across one entity, whether it's a corporation, whether it's an NGO or whether it is a political entity such as in Germany or America that has not taken advantage of the coronavirus to get things that it wanted and otherwise couldn't get. I think that that's somewhat of a tragedy. I saw police yesterday ticketing people in Cologne because they were standing too close to each other, because their mask did not cover entirely their face. You know, we have people all over the world, including America and especially Germany, who are already confused. They're already somewhat fearful, somewhat anxious. They don't know what's happening to them or what their future looks like, and we're using this pandemic to make them more anxious and more fearful and more confused. And I think that that's probably a tragedy. You know, there are 66 people today in intensive care from COVID in all of Berlin. That doesn't even compare to the normal flu from the past few years. So I think that we need to put this in perspective. Of course, it's affecting the global economy right now. And we say, well, when there's a vaccine and when everyone can have a vaccine, well, there's 7.4 billion people in the world. Most people can't afford a vaccine, so who will get it when it's in small numbers? Who can afford it? How will it be distributed? You're talking about a 4 or 5 year period before so-called COVID is under control. So most of the global economy would be long destroyed before that period came. So the vaccine is not the answer, as we're being told. I think the answer is to have the right perspective on what we're in and what's happening. For the vast majority of people, especially young people under 25, COVID is a bad cold with a fever. And in a few days, it's gone. The right perspective is what we need.
Professor Toel, is there anything else you would like to let our viewers know?
Thank you, Uta. You know, back after World War II, there was a 20-year period where there was a clean sweep and the outside came in and controlled Germany and set up a new curriculum for schools. And in fact, the Americans set up the German Constitution. Morgenthau and others said that Germans were not involved in setting up the new Constitution or the Basic Law. So in those first 25 years, that was very necessary because there were many people here who were not trustworthy in the Western way of thinking. So, but then all of a sudden it started to morph into something that was more German, and that was maybe in the second 25 years, it sort of became accepted to be Zweite Klasse Amerikanisch or Zweite Klasse Europäisch, and here comes McDonald's and Starbucks and Burger King, and so I think Germans kind of got used to it, and they started seeing that this was sort of an easy way. You didn't have to take responsibility. You didn't have to have expectations. You could be fun Germans without having to be responsible Germans. And I think maybe that was the second 25 years, and that was a period of acceptance. We're an occupied country, and so our security is in their hands, so why don't we take it easy? And at 3 p.m, we'll go to the monkey bar, or we will go for 90 days of vacation to Mallorca. So I think that was the second 25 years, but I think this last 25 years, there's been something beyond acceptance, and that is what I call an addiction. Germans have actually become addicted to all of these things. I just walked down the street. You got Marilyn Monroe and James Dean and Humphrey Bogart, and everything has a theme as if this is some suburb of America. But it's not. Germany is a very unique and special place. The German language is one of the most beautiful languages in the world. I'm not fortunate enough to be a German. I'm sorry for that. I feel that way. German literature, German music. But you know, the Allies came here with one mentality, and that was Germanness was bad. But they didn't have the intellect to figure out what was bad and what was good. So they threw the baby out with the bathwater, and that was the only solution they had. So from that moment on, to be German means, well, we have no vision, we have no dream, we have no input into our future. You know, the Brits just take off. They say, we have Brexit. We're taking off. A divorce. We're gone. Oh, by the way, without asking, we're keeping all of the beautiful German lands that we captured 75 years ago. We forgot to ask anyone in Berlin if we could keep them after the divorce. Well, that's unprecedented. So, and whether American soldiers are here in great numbers or small numbers, Ramstein Air Force Base is where we run all of our worldwide operations for the Middle East out of. Germany remains an occupied mentality, but in the third phase, this last 25 years, I'm afraid you've become addicted to it. You've actually become to the point where you like it, where you expect it. And I think that's a tragedy. You're robbing the world. As America withdraws for this election debacle, there's going to be 2.5 billion people in this world who all of a sudden are left vulnerable and unprotected. Oh, they say China will come in and protect them. China's 20 years from having the maturity to protect anybody. They say, oh, well, France is vainglorious. They will certainly go out with Macron and protect them. France has no effective model to work outside of their own country. They say, oh, Russia will step up. Russia's a regional power with a big microphone who's pretending to be something that they're not. The Germans are the only one with the model, with the intellect, with the systems to be able to protect these people. And if the Germans don't do it, nobody's going to do it. The warlords are going to go crazy, and these people are going to be hurting because we're not going to be there to protect them any longer. So I think it's extremely important that Germany now all of a sudden stands up tall. They are tall. It's time for them to stand up to their full height and to start taking responsibility. The world desperately needs it.
Professor Toel, thank you very much for taking your time and especially for sharing your views and thoughts with our viewers. I wish you a pleasant stay in Germany and I hope to hear a lot of you in the future.
Thank you, Uta.
Herzlichen Dank fürs Zuschauen und Ihnen, Herr Professor Toel, für dieses aufschlussreiche und informative Gespräch.